Hi everyone, welcome back to JobConscious. I have my guest here today. He'll introduce himself.
My name is Hamal Strayhorn, and I'm the director for the Office of Social Justice and Diversity here at Montclair State University.
So, Hamal, tell us a little bit about who you are as a person.
Um, who am I as a person? That's a deep question. I'm originally from North Carolina. A very small town called Pollocksville, North Carolina, where I always joke that the cows outnumber the people. But it's near the coast of North Carolina. So I grew up in North Carolina um, during, I guess, the 80s. I'm 79, right at the cusp at the end. And then I did my my college work at Gardner Webb University. I actually transferred into Gardner Webb. I started at a HBCU, a historically black university, Barber Scotia College. And after Barber Scotia, I stayed there for a year, but realized that experience was not what I wanted. And so I transferred to Gardner Webb University, which is a predominantly white institution in Western North Carolina. Probably about 45 minutes from Charlotte, about an hour, and I would say about an hour and a half from Asheville. And that's where I did finish up my undergrad career in political science and religious studies. And then I went back again, and I always call it academic incest. Went back to the same institution where I got my bachelor's degree and got my master's in divinity and counseling. And so that's where I started, and I'm an ordained minister, which is a part of or one of my many identities that I share. Um, and from there, I lived in Georgia for a while and worked at Georgia Southern University for about 3 years. I always joke as well about moving from the hottest place in the world to the coldest place in the world. Because after that, I went to Oswego, New York. It snows in feet, which you probably know, and right on Lake Ontario. Beautiful place. I always try to get back up there once or twice a year. It's a beautiful location, but it's also a very cold location in the wintertime. And so I stayed there for about 3 years. And after that, during that time, I met and married my wife, Latrell, and she and I met, married, and we moved to Virginia for about a year, and I worked in George Mason for about a year. And there was some need for us to move back up north where my wife is from for family issues. And so I moved back north and settled in a small town in the Poconos where I currently live and commute here at Montclair State. I did share a short time at a university in Pennsylvania. And after that, worked in the mental health field for a while, and then Montclair I found Montclair, and Montclair found me, and so I've been here for about 6 years.
It was meant to be. Well, now that we know everything about you, it's nice to meet you. Thanks,
Nice to meet
everyone.
you.
No,
Sorry.
but no. I'm just teasing. But you brought up a lot of interesting points, and it's kind of interesting to see where you went and your experiences there that you just shared, because you can kind of see how they all tie in towards one purpose and one goal and multiple identities that you've shared. So you grew up in North Carolina. What experiences in North Carolina set you up for your first step into university?
What experience? I would say I've always wanted to go to college. I think it was also mandated in my house. I'm a part of what I would call a first generation household.
Okay.
My father only finished high school, and my mother, she got a trade degree. And she opened up her business. She's a hairdresser and still works strong after 35 years. And so it was always really pressed upon me to continue my education, not only in my family, but also just in the community in which I lived. As you can see, I always tell people I'm authentically and unapologetically Black. And sometimes in the South, it can be difficult growing up as a person of color.
Right.
And so it was always pressed upon us that education is the key for success in being a person of color, and also in the job market and job field. So it was important for us to go to school. So I never thought that I wouldn't go. I would say my parents probably thought that when I was in elementary and high school that I would never get there because my grades were so uh, horrible.
Was there
But
something that didn't interest you about school, or was it that you were thinking of other things?
well, I would say it was some identity challenges when it comes to me being a person of color and being from North Carolina. I had a teacher tell me at a very young age that I wouldn't amount to anything.
Really?
And she was not the most inclusive individual. I would say she was on the side of racist, and
This was again in the early '80s.
this was the early '80s.
Yeah.
And so she was I would say she was my third or fourth grade teacher. And I think within that time frame, it was just my whole demeanor just went down. And I was told that I couldn't accomplish anything. And so I felt like I couldn't.
Right.
I think it was around my seventh, or I think it was the end of my seventh grade year, entering to my eighth grade year. I started really relying on my faith. I'm a Christian man. I accepted Christ in my life very young, and so it came to a point where I started using mantras and wordings from the biblical scripture to help me in my process. And so I started quoting the passage by the Apostle Paul, "I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me." And I think around the seventh or eighth grade, my counselor brought me in, and he said to me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And at that time, I wanted to be a dentist or a surgeon, actually. I don't know why, because I was not the greatest person in like science. No one wanted me to work on their mouth to do any type of surgery. Um, and so at the time, I wanted to be an oral surgeon. I said, "I want to be an oral surgeon." And he looked at me and said, "You're never going to accomplish this. You're never going to make it."
This was the second person.
And this is the second person who also happened to identify as white. But, it's just like, I think I'm going to show you differently. And I think from that point on, when difficult times came, I started actually quoting the scripture. And I buckled down, I studied, I kept that part of my faith very close to me. And from that point on, my eighth grade year on, I started excelling. By the time I graduated high school, I was in the National Honor Society. I was the president of
Do
every
you remember the day where
organization.
that kind of flipped? Where you flipped the script?
I don't know what day it was. I don't
Yeah.
know what day of the week it was. I just remember that it just came to me. It's just like I can do this. I can do these things. I'm not going to allow someone to tell me that I can't. I started to get more confidence in myself. I would say as a young child, was not as confident in myself as I probably should have, and it wasn't because of anything that happened at home. I was a big kid. I used at my heaviest in my adulthood, I was 428 pounds.
Wow.
And so as a child, I was also a husky little boy and tall.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also struggled in that area with my weight, and I struggled with identity around that. And
Especially at such a young age.
yeah, and kids are kids, and they talk about you, they call you the fat kid or whatever. And so even though I had a good front, it affected me internally.
Of course.
And I internalized a lot of things. And I think when I started believing in myself, and started, really saying, you know what, I don't really care what other people think about me and what other people are saying about me.
Of course.
And really sharing my identity with my faith and who I know I am. That's what really was that turnaround for me. And I said, well, if I can start doing it here, I can start doing it also academically as well. So it doesn't matter what people say to me, or "You're never going to make it." Well, we'll see about that. I'll
let your actions speak for you.
I'll let my actions speak for me. And so I think, around that age of 13, 14 years old was when those things started turning around for me.
Is that when you made the decision that you were going to go to university and major in both political science and business studies?
No, that was not it. When I went to college, I still was I always say I was still dreaming that I'm going to fulfill this biology major. And I just realized that biology was, even though I may like it, I'm a learner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know anything about Strengths Quest or anything. I'm a learner. A part of that, it talks about what are your different strengths, and my top strength is a learner. So I love to read. I love to just absorb information. And so I was like, oh, well, I want to be an oral surgeon. I want to be a dentist. I want to look in these areas. And that really interests me. But I could not produce the academic work in that area.
So you started off taking classes in biology.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I started taking classes in biology, and I did okay. But I'm pretty sure that someone who made a C didn't want me to probably be doing surgery in their mouth. But I did okay. But I realized that early on, even in high school, that my passion was always with like the history and the politics and things like that. And that was something that really, really, I really enjoyed. And so I guess around my sophomore year, after I transferred from Barbara Scotia College to Gardner Webb, is when I decided to when I transferred, I changed my major and transitioned over to political science and saw myself excel in that area because that's something that I had a passion for and I love. And religious studies was something that I had a passion for. And a part of I always say, I think that was also the very start of me, or the very start of the idea and understanding of what social justice meant, because I started looking at political systems and how things are set up, and how the systems sometimes can be set up against those who are oppressed and those who and for those who have privileges. Right. And it also forced me to even look at how my own personal faith that I had chosen and also world religions, how sometimes things can be set up based on systems of oppression and oppressing other groups. And so that started those wheels to turn. And then how can I use my passion of my faith and also what I'm doing and loving politics, right? And merge those so people won't feel oppressed, and I can actually speak out for those who are a part of marginalized and underrepresented communities.
Right. When you made that decision to transfer and change majors, was that decision when you felt that you were in the right spot?
Yes.
At the right time?
Yes.
It kind of felt as if you were where you were meant to be.
Yes, I felt that was where I intended and was supposed to be.
Now, when you made that switch, was there anything, like any struggle that you had thinking, going from biology to political science, thinking that you were making a transition? So was there anything that you were thinking about, or is this the right step at first? Was it something that it took a lot to kind of say?
I would say it took a lot because my parents wanted me to be like the doctor, because I had already, they had saw me starting to excel in high school, and actually, when I went to Barbara Scotia College, I was accepted on full scholarship. I was full academic scholarship, and so I was in that way of becoming, quote unquote, that doctor. And it was also something that my parents wanted me to become. But then I had to realize, was this something that I wanted to do? And so, you have the voices. I always say the voices from home and your own personal voice saying, you should go to where your passions lie, or you should listen to your parents. And so I always said that was also a spiritual awakening for me, and also a spiritual death for me, because I cried that day because I wanted to be this dentist, this oral surgeon, or going to oral surgery. I wanted that, but I knew that was not my passion internally, and I knew that if I continued on this road, I may not get through school the way that I wanted to get through school, because I had started, because of that, I had started losing scholarships because I was not doing as well. Exactly. And keeping my GPA up. And I said, you know what, if I'm going to remain here, because Gardner Webb was a nicely expensive private school, and so I was like, if I'm going to stay here and remain here, I have to do something that is best for me and not what's best for other people.
Exactly.
And so that's when I picked up my folder from my advisor, and I walked over to the political science department. I said to my professor at that time, and said, who became my major professor at that time, and advisor, I was like, yeah, I'm here to transfer. And so from there, it opened up just new levels of opportunities. I got my scholarships back, my GPA went up.
It felt right.
It felt right.
And just from those experiences that you've had in political science, you kind of sense that that was where you needed to be.
Yeah.
Your identity was there.
Yeah.
And what would you say to students that are in similar situations?
I would say to students who are struggling with what they want to do compared to what other people are telling them to do is to go with what they have the passion for. I think a lot of times our students now are looking for jobs that's going to pay them a lot of money. And I hear it all the time with students saying, I'm going to graduate and I'm going to make $200,000 as soon as I walk out the door. And I'm saying that's probably not going to happen. I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. And that may happen for some people, but if we look at what our life is like, our nation is like, it's the top 1%. And out of all the people that would graduate from any institution in the United States, only about 1% of those will actually make it to be a millionaire. So I always say you should probably want to go with your passion and go in that direction, because having a lot of money could be nice or is nice, but if you're getting it in a way that you're not passionate about it or you're not being fulfilled by it, it really becomes obsolete. Because I always say money can't buy happiness. We see that now. We see that with the loss of a great comedian, Robin Williams, and he made the whole world laugh. And he probably had money that we can't even count, and a net worth of millions and millions of dollars, but he wasn't happy. And the unfortunate thing, he made other people laugh, but he wasn't internally happy.
It's a mess.
And he did not have joy. And his happiness and joy is very differently. And happiness is a day-to-day measure. Joy is something that's internal. And I don't think a lot of times we think about the present happiness, and we don't think about the internal joy that we need from certain things. And money gives us that present happiness, that brief happiness, but after you make $100,000, if that's what your salary is going to be after tax, or it's probably not going to be that after taxes anyway. But
no, that's true.
But you think about it. You have this wealth, and $100,000 in certain places is not. It's not even this pocket change in some places, and so you have this wealth. You're trying to build up this wealth, but you're not trying to build up the other things that are around you.
Exactly.
And so, and relying on those passions and those people around you, and money is not going to fulfill that. And so, I always tell people. I was actually having a conversation with a student last year who was in their senior year, and he was in a major that he was not doing well in, and he had a passion for music. And he's like, and I heard him play one time, and he was amazing. But he's like, I can't get money here. And I was like, well, what's most important for you, the happiness and the passion,
right,
or gaining wealth? And so I think that's a lot of times where I tend to speak with students is just like, you have to find out what your passion is and go towards that passion.
Exactly. And as a man that's worked in many different positions, starting from a resident advisor,
Yeah.
How important do you
even before then?
how important do you see job satisfaction, quality of life with students that are just not where they need to be?
Yeah. I think everything has to play into your life. I think like you can't separate yourself from your job and from your life. I think all of this has to be dealt within in your passion. I know you have to. Okay, your job is a 9 to 5. You're getting paid for your vocation or whatever. But it also has to play a part into the consistency of your life, because if I did a presentation on this a couple of years ago about matching your values with your future job, and you spend about 80 to 90 hours, or more, some people, at work. This is where you spend the majority of your life. And so you need to be happy with that. And if you're not happy with that, you're always going to be moving. You're always going to be searching for something. And so you have to be happy with what you're doing. And it should also connect with your life. For me, I work in social justice and diversity. I've worked in student affairs, but my passion for what I've done, working with students and working in res life, and now the Office for Social Justice, it always has married with what I do in my personal life. I can bring my family here to my job, and and it's a part, and it becomes a part of who I am. They are part of the interworkings of what I do. They can learn from those who are around me, as well as I can learn from those who I'm serving and working with. And so I think you can't separate those particular pieces. Not every job is going to be that you have is you're going to be able to easily marry that together. But I think when an occupation or vocation is keeping you from building things that are, I would call, eternal values, then that position in the job isn't for you.
Right. And just kind of going off of what you said about being in an environment that's positive and making sure that that's something that can keep you within your faith. I know this is something that we discussed beforehand, was that you always want to be around a positive environment. Now, for people that find themselves in a negative environment, whether it's a major they don't like, that they have that dissonance with, or being in a workplace where they're starting to realize that this is not where they need to be, how does one go through those emotions and thoughts when it's not something that's commonly discussed, that you need to find the next step?
I had some great mentors in my life, because whatever job or whatever position you get, it's not going to be nirvana. It's not going to be utopia. And so you have to realize within yourself what type of environment can I work in, and what type of environment can I live in. Connecting your values and your beliefs to your job. So when you're out interviewing, a lot of times when students leave undergrad or grad school, they was like, I need a job. So that's the first thing they're going to look for is a job. But they fail to ask those questions that are very important to them. And I'm just as guilty, because when I was when I was coming out of grad school, the first thing was like, I need a job so I can pay off my student loan.
Yeah,
that was the
and
first
a lot of
thing.
students find themselves in that situation.
Yeah. And so I was just blessed and fortunate to be in a role, and privileged to be in a career that is mobile, and that that I can move around to different places. Everybody doesn't have that luxury. And so, when you get to a place, I think before you even get to that place, you have to ask those right questions. And so realizing what's important to you in the job. Can you take time off to be with your family? Can you, does this organization meet certain values that you have? For me, if I have to work I'm a minister. If I have to work consistently on Sundays, that job is probably not the best place and the right place for me. So I have to be, I may have to leave that role, because as a person of faith, my faith is more so a value for me.
Right.
So for me, I list my top 3 things. Even when I'm starting the job search, or sometimes I'll just go back and say, what's important to me? What do I value? And my top 3 values are, number 1, my faith, number 2, my family, and then number 3 comes work, because that's I have a strong work ethic.
But you can see, just from being in this society, a lot of times that number 1 value is work.
Yeah.
And then family and other values kind of fall down the ladder. And seeing that within a lot of industries nowadays, do you think that having work number 1 is a detriment?
I do. I think when you have put work above your family, and what I call family is one of those eternal values. Your family is something that will keep you and hopefully sustain you even when the job won't.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if an organization or corporation loses money, they're going to downsize. You may be fired or asked to leave your role, and your family will be there to sustain you and hold you. And so I think that's where we have our values and those things out of line. So, work is important, don't get me wrong, because you need to pay the bills.
Exactly.
But it shouldn't be your top priority. We see that in our society now, that people very rarely take vacation because they're consistently working.
Here in America.
And I'm guilty of that as well. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I can't take off because I have X, Y, and Z to do. But then I have to realize that I'm a father of 4 small kids, and I want my children to know who I am, and also spend some time with them. We don't have to go to Disney World. We can go in the backyard and play.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times the concept in America, and maybe I would say this concept is, not just in America, but it's also something that's global, is that I want to give my child better than what I have.
Oh, of course.
And I think it's important to have that goal, but sometimes you have to be like, you know what is better? Understanding what is better. Is better going to Disney World, or is better being present?
Right.
I look at my life. I have a wonderful father. I love my father and my mother. I was blessed. I was blessed to have my parents together, and they've been married now for about 48 years. But one thing that I get sad about sometimes is that because I come from a very working class family, and we didn't have a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And my father worked almost 80 to 90 hours a week. And I never really saw my father. The only time I saw my dad
was when he came home.
And he worked at night. And so by the time I got out of school, he was getting ready to go back to work. And then on the weekends, he slept so he could catch up for going back to work on Monday. And so that, to me, what would have been more valuable to me is not to go to Disney World, but to actually spend time with my father,
right,
and him being at my football games more, and that would have been better for me. And so I think we as a society have to get into our minds is that what do we value?
Exactly.
And are we valuing to work so we can get to Disney World or Europe or all these different places? Or are we really valuing the time that we have with our kids and with those who are around us? And don't get me wrong, I love Disney World just as great as the next person, or I love traveling as great as the next person. But at the end of the day, we have to find out what better is. And sometimes we do put work above our family, and I don't. And for me, my value has always been my faith first, my family, because my faith is going to keep me and grounded and focused with my family, and then work will keep.
Right.
Will be there, and I can sustain that.
Now, I know you don't have the answer to this question. This is a very big question, but how can we become more aware of this, that this societal issue is going on, and how can we take the next steps? Not the answer, but how can we take the next steps to kind of realign ourselves with what's important?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I think one of these stories that I always go back to is one of my mentors that I had. And, she said to me one day, she's like, we were Facebook friends, and she said to me one day, I wish I had kids. And I said, so why didn't you? She said, well, I worked. And I was like, so you allowed work to prevent you from ever having a family? And she was like, I always wished that I was married and had a family. She said, I worked in the area for 20 years and I didn't even know my neighbors.
So it was the idea that she had this value, and it was something that she valued, but she was, maybe if that was number one on the ladder, she kind of took number 3 and brought it up, and brought number 1 down to 2 or 3.
And we find that I think in generations we find that too. And I think we're moving quickly back to where I have to work, because our society, everything is inflating, and so people feel like they have to work and make sure they're, some people are just working to pay the bills. Some people may be working to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the end of the day, what is money getting you? What is this job getting you? And if you're losing out on something that you treasure, then is this really what you should be doing?
Exactly.
Whatever job that may be, whether that is working in student affairs and you feel like it's not where you're supposed to be, whether that's working in corporate America and working in a position where you don't feel like you're supposed to be. I think we have to all take that internalized look and see what we truly value and say, okay, now that I have realized my value, does this job match up with my values? And if it does, great. Now organize your life. I always say, I say to my kids, get your mind right, and organize your life to where you're not missing out on those other important things.
Right.
But if it's not, and you're missing out on those important things, if this job is keeping you from certain things that you truly value, then it's time to reevaluate and bow gracefully. And, I did a program, and it was called "Know When to Hold 'Em," off the song "Know When to Hold 'Em, Know When to Fold 'Em, and Know When to Walk Away." And I think that's when you have to, or know when to run too. But you have to know. It's like, okay, this is not the place for me. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing now, and leave well.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article on my Facebook page about that. It's like, when you realize that this is not the place for you, then it's not saying I'm gonna just throw the papers up and say forget this place and leave.
Exactly.
But it's leaving well, because you also want people to talk positively about you and say, you know what, this job may have not been for him, or her, but it's time that I can move. But as this person left this organization, they left it better than how they came in. They left it better. You always want to leave a situation better and say, you know what, this is not my value, but I want to move on. And when I leave, this is how I'm leaving this place. I had a traumatic experience at one institution that I worked. And it was the very first time in my professional career race had came into my work. And I was asked in my job, how did I get my job being Black? And a part of me was like, well, my many years of experience. And I was a manager at the time. I was a senior manager at that role, and someone asked me in that position, and I was not supported by those around me. And I stayed in that role for about 4 months.
This was after 4 months after the experience.
Yeah, 4 months after the experience. And during that whole time there, it was not the greatest experience. I still had issues. After that one experience, there was other issues that came up around ethnicity and culture and race, with those who supervised me and those who not supervised. And I had to make that check. It was like, and the hard part is that at that time, my wife was pregnant with my second child. If I left this position, I would not have any insurance or cash flow going on. And so I had to make that decision. Said, what do I value? And I was not being the best father and husband that I needed to be in this role. And my health was failing because I was stressed about work, and I was in the hospital at least 3 times in that 4 months, and I never.
There are a lot of variables.
There's a lot of variables. And so I decided, without having a job, it was time for me to go.
That's a big step to take too, especially because they were all relying on you.
There's a lot relying on me. And my wife is a minister herself, and she was not working at the time. And so everything was relying on me. And I left. And it was a hard decision. I cried about the decision, but I left. And 6 years later, I don't think it was a bad decision.
You wish you would have done it earlier?
Probably. Probably, as a part of me, wish I hadn't taken a job.
Yeah.
But there was some needs to make some transitions in my life. And, but at that time I had to make that decision, and I had to find out what I value most. Do I value my health and my family more than I value this job? And I realized that I valued my health and my life. But when I left well. Like, even if you were to call that place today and they say, could you tell me about Hamal? Somebody could lie. But I left well. I completed all of my projects. I gave them everything that they needed, along with my resignation. And I said, thank you for my experience here. Thank you for my time. But I can no longer
And you didn't dive into it. You said your piece and
Yeah.
you left. And
Yeah.
you left it better than how
And
you.
I left it better. I left the role better than I came in with it.
Right.
And so I think people have to understand that sometimes you don't. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out process. You first have to internalize what's important. And if your job is keeping you sick, or if you're not getting those different things that you particularly need, then you have to evaluate those things.
Right.
And tell, and talk to your supervisors about it if you need to, and just say thank you for this opportunity. However, it's time for me to transition and leave it better.
Do you think this experience helped fuel your message through being the social justice and diversity
I think it was,
person at Montclair State University?
it was the kindling fact. I've had many experiences with microaggressions, racism, and things in my life. And I think that particular thing in my professional career really kindled me, because I did not want another professional staff or student to go through anything that I went through. And so I believe in the institution. I worked in the mental health field for a while, using my counseling background, but also working to help those who are marginalized. It was, a lot of the individuals that I helped had severe mental issues. And so I worked with them and helping them, getting them back into society, doing programmatic activities and connecting them with organizations. But then coming here, I took on the training role for Office of Residence Life. And so a lot of my training, focused for paraprofessional and professional staff, focused on not only what they needed for their job, but also other procedures, policies, but also some other areas that I feel like we needed, which was in diversity and multicultural competence.
Right. So now here at Montclair State University, what is your day-to-day like?
Well, I think my day-to-day has changed. As I shared, I've been here at Montclair for 6 years, and I worked for most of that as assistant director for Residence Life. And so that encompassed a lot of working with training, development for our professional and student staff. I also met with students for conduct issues on campus. I also went into the student's office as an investigator for Title IX. And so I did that for 5 years, and then now in this role as director, I only started in November, so it's a lot of catch up, and it's a lot of trying to figure out some things and putting systems into place. So my day to day is right now is putting systems into place and being the voice for my office and for the students on this campus who for all students. I don't look at my role. I think sometimes when people hear the word social justice and diversity, they only look at oh well, he's speaking and representing students from marginalized and underrepresented groups. But my role as a director is to speak for all students. Though many of our centers are geared towards marginalized groups, which is the Women's Center, the LGBTQ Center, the Multicultural Center, and the Center for Faith and Spirituality, though they work towards increasing knowledge around underrepresented and marginalized groups. But I feel like my role is also to speak for all students and to make sure that all students are heard. And all voices are heard around that table, regardless if I like those voices or not. I think sometimes that people forget that people have their own opinions. People come from different places and spaces. It is my role as a director, and my role for my office is to be educators. And some voices are out there that I may not always care for.
That's in any work environment.
And that's in any work environment, in any space and place. But my role is to give space to that, and also to create an environment where we can have dialogue around them, so we can all grow together. So a person who may think differently on certain issues and topics and subjects that I see one way, we can have dialogue on that. So hopefully I can learn from them and see where they're coming from, and they can also learn from me. and see where I'm coming from. Hopefully they'll take my knowledge and change their own, depending on what the topic is.
Right.
But I think it's important to have that dialogue. I think sometimes certain populations on our campus, they feel left out because it's when they hear the word social justice and diversity, they only think one way. And so, and you know, I look at our students who may identify as white. Sometimes our white students don't see themselves as having a race. And I want people to understand that you do have a race. There is you can identify as Italian, you can identify as European, you know, all these different richness. And so I think sometimes over the years, whiteness has been disassociated with race, and or culture has been disassociated with that.
Right.
And so you know, I want to be a sounding board for all of our students, and to allow students to speak and to feel heard. And not only to feel heard, but also have some dialogue around that, because we all have our own stuff, our own implicit biases, our own things, that
our own
are
experiences
that produce who we are today. And so my role as a director is to allow space for conversation, and to also not only allow that space, but also allow that dialogue to happen in a safe environment.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned that you are a sounding board. Do you feel like you take on a lot of the emotions and dialogue that comes on in your daily life, and how do you manage that?
Do I take it on? I try not to. I try to use a lot of my counseling skills, so I won't take it on. I hear it. I also have a wonderful wife that allows me to vomit when I come home, allow me to regurgitate my experience.
Not physically.
Not physically, but to emotionally regurgitate my feelings. And she's able to help me balance some of those things. But I think a lot of times with just being a counselor, and I also have connections with my peers who are from CAPS, and so we have some dialogue a lot of times when I do hear challenging conversations and how to approach those things that we have on campus, whether that is with students or other professionals. And so I feel like when you say take it on, I feel like I'm that sounding board, but I also have positive ways to not take it home, and not always take it home and internalize that, because I also realize that other people's experiences are their experiences. One thing that I've learned in counseling, I used to work as a chaplain. I have a lot of jobs, a lot of hats.
Oh, I know. And each one brings a different perspective.
Yeah. And this is one thing that I've learned, particularly as I have counseled people at the end of life, in the families at the end of life, is to realize that their pain is not my pain. When we start internalizing people's pains, we begin to make their pain inauthentic, and so their pain is their pain, it's their authentic pain, and I want people to be able to share their authentic selves with me, and me not take that on. And so I try to separate myself from their pain, understanding their pain, but not taking that pain on. And so being able to show comfort, being able to be a voice, be able to be that person that can have that dialogue with it. You know, when people come into my office and say, I face this issue, okay, and I don't want to hear what nobody else has to say about it. And I say, well, let's stop, let's reflect on this, and then let's talk about this, and really allowing people to process these things themselves, because after they sit down and process these things, it's just like, well, maybe I could have said that differently. Maybe this person doesn't believe this way. So we can bring those other people in and have that dialogue.
Do you feel like a lot of times, just from your experiences with dealing with individuals, do you find that you're one of the first people that are raising this message to them of, you know, healthy communication and openness and vulnerability?
Sometimes I think people are getting it from other places, but sometimes it can be difficult because we live in a society that this is my way. We have social media. People are very good behind the computer, and they are safe, and they can say whatever they want to say and not have to be challenged on that, or have to talk to people face to face. And so I try to get people from behind the computer and into my office because a lot of people, I've gotten emails from some people, and I'm just like, well, when would you say this in my face? I invite people in, and I also believe in positive intent as well. And so any approach that I take with a student or a peer colleague is that if I've got something offensive, or they, or even having a conversation with them, feel like they've been offended by someone, I always say to them, and I also say to myself, it's positive intent. Is are you um, thinking about that person and the times and the things that they've been through, and maybe that was something that I said and you said that triggered something in you. So you can't say, that person did this on purpose, unless they say, what, I did that on purpose. But when you don't know, take it from the positive side. What could I have said or have done to make this, to have changed the outcome to this particular situation, and trying to start there, and having dialogue with individuals. When people come down and sit face to face, using I statements. This is how I feel. This is how I saw the situation, and then they can turn around and say, well, this is how I feel. This is how I heard. This is what I heard you say. And I think when people can start having dialogue and face-to-face interaction, because anything across text or email or social media, words can be taken out of context. It's when you're sitting and having dialogue with people, and you can see the facial expression, you can see the hand movements and the tones of voice, you really know what someone is really trying to get across to you. Of course. And I think we lost that. Mm-hmm. I think people have a hard time with conflict. I've never been that person. So I think a lot of times people have that challenge of conflict, and I think confrontations are good. I try to call them carefrontations. It's something I found a long time ago when I used to teach and do some training on confrontations. It's really, a confrontation teaches you how to have dialogue, and it teaches you how to understand people from their perspective, and understanding what people are trying to say, and being able to listen, and not listen to speak, not to have a conversation where you're ready to speak, but really listen to people and to listen and hear what they're trying to get across. So then, therefore, you can paraphrase and have that dialogue with them and saying, this is what I was trying to get across. And really building a relationship, because that's the hard thing in whether you're working with someone as a colleague or a peer, whether you're living with someone in your residence hall space that you've never met before. If you have dialogue with people and not read notes or not send nasty text messages or emails, just have dialogue. I say this to parents when I was working in resident life. I used to say this to parents all the time. Teach your kids how to have dialogue when they first come in, because inevitably they're going to be living with someone that is from a different space, different place than they are. And they need to have dialogue about certain things. Like, I love to clean, so I know that I like a clean bathroom. The person who I'm living with may not care about the bathroom, but they want to make sure that the kitchen is clean and spotless. Mm-hmm. So our dialogue is that I'll keep the bathrooms clean while you keep the kitchen clean.
Communication is key.
Communication is very much the key.
We're not mind readers.
Yes.
Wish I could. Exactly. Just from your experiences, just from, where you grew up, mm-hmm. to going to college for the first time and making that transition, political mm-hmm. science, religious studies, divinity, mm-hmm. Social justice and diversity, mm-hmm. That entire chronology there. What is a perspective that you've gained that many people don't see through those transitions? What's something that you've learned that most people don't talk about?
What have I learned through these transitions? That is a very good question. Something I really never thought about. But, wow.
No pressure.
Man, I need to write this down.
Yeah.
I think through through my transitions, the thing that people may have not thought about is just um, looking at what when you're working with individuals of different backgrounds, whether that's race, ethnicity, culture, sexual orientation, identity. Um, it's really looking at what's deep. I think I think my faith, looking at religious studies and divinity and ministry, is like it's a depth thing, something that sometimes you can't touch, you don't really know how to articulate, is really how we are made up as people. I believe the Creator made us like that. It's so that we can learn from one another, and that my experiences is not the same as your experiences. But in order for us to be successful in life, I have to rely on you, and you have to rely on me. We're interconnected that way. And so I think my transition through just the different places is understand, even in biology, it's just like, even with that, on a level, we are all one spiritual beings, and that we are beings that rely on one another to survive and to care for. And when we are disassociated from one another, when we don't have that harmony, when racism and hatred and bigotry and misogyny causes that to schism, we're not what we need to be. And so I think through those transitions, it really helped me harmonize and to understand who we are as a people. Is that though we are different, whether that's the tone of our skin or our identity, or in just different spaces and places, we need each other. We can't function in life without one another. I always go to the point, who cares if your sexual identity or orientation is different than mine? You're human. You're a human being, and you are worthy to be cared for. I go back to the teaching of Jesus. Who is my neighbor? Those around me are my neighbors, and I am not forced, but I am called to love people as I love myself, and I love me. And so if I love me,
who wouldn't?
Yeah, that's what I love me. I care for me. And so if I love me, I should love my neighbor, the person, you, just like I love me, and love you better than me, and treat you as a human being, and treat you as a created being. And I think my transitions has really aligned my thought processes of the human creation, is that we should be for each other, and it does not matter our background, where we come from, because we learn from one another through that. Because your experiences are not the same as my experiences, but if we listen and learn from one another, we can grow.
So last question, this is a question that I usually like to end with, is if there's a student in a certain situation that isn't not sure of the next step to take, what would you say to them? What would you recommend?
Not sure what the next step to take, I would say to them is just really find someone that you trust, whether that is a mentor or an advisor, and speak with them about what they're going through and what they're thinking, and so they can help you process through those things, and then really look at your own values and your personal needs. Take what they have given you guidance for, look at your values, and then move forward.
Come talk to you.
Yeah, come talk to me. I can help.
Thank you so much for coming today. I feel like you really brought a lot of knowledge here.
I hope. Thank you.